What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this video, I'm going to be building an awesome $2,000 gaming PC build for 2022. All of the twos. I'll be walking you through all the components I selected for this build and why, the color scheme I've gone for, probably a bit of a giveaway already, and then of course walking through the performance later on, after we've gone ahead and actually put the thing together. Without any further ado, let's dive into it after a quick ad from today's video sponsor. Corsair's M65 RGB Ultra Wireless builds upon the legendary M65 design with the latest Corsair Slipstream wireless tech and much more. With a 26,000 dpi Corsair Marksman sensor that can be adjusted in dpi steps as small as 1, this mouse means business. Adjustable weight allows you to find your perfect center of gravity, while Omron optical switches deliver hyper-fast and precise responses. Everything you love about the M65 in 2021, now wireless. Check it out at the links in the description below. As if the introduction wasn't a bit of a giveaway, for this build I've gone for more of a white theme, evident particularly when you take a look at the motherboard. MSI's brand new MPG Z690 Force Wi-Fi. To be honest with you, this motherboard was kind of the impetus for today's video, so let's kick things off by building up the motherboard assembly, where you install as many components into the board as possible. Holy mother of Wi-Fi! MSI were not messing about when they came to including this desk-mounted Wi-Fi antenna. It looks awesome. Anyway, this is a great board. You can see from the rear I/O here, we've got plenty of connectivity. Everything from USB 3, USB-C, Wi-Fi 6, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. No Thunderbolt, bit of a disappointment, but you will get that on slightly higher end boards. Aesthetically though, it looks awesome. And of course supports the latest 12th gen Intel CPUs. And that's where this comes in. This right here is the Intel Core i5-12600K. And to be honest with you, whatever Intel chip you go for depends on your use case. If you're looking for gaming, the i5 is great. For a bit of productivity, the i7 is super. And if you just fancy getting the best performance on the market right now, the i9-12900K is the CPU for you. For this build though, the i5 is going to be great. With Intel's latest performancy and efficiency cores, it strikes a perfect balance between single and multi-threaded performance. And my goodness, does it make me pleased to see Intel return to the market with a competitive CPU. AMD? It's now your turn. There's also something quite cool about this new socket design that Intel have pioneered. It's kind of like a gull wing, opens from the bottom, closes at the top, and just looks really, really quite cool. Now, what we want to do next is install the RAM or the memory. And you may think, James, you've let the theme of the build down already. The white theme gone out the window. You've got black memory. But to be honest with you, that's because there aren't many white DDR5 kits around, full stop. Now for the new Intel chips, you can of course opt for a DDR4 or DDR5 setup, and the option you choose will dictate the motherboard choice you need to go for. The one thing I will say though is if you're going for a high-end setup, you definitely want DDR5. It might be early days for the new RAM standard, but why bottleneck some of these really new expensive CPUs by going for memory that's just plainly not quick enough? Now to install the memory into the motherboard, this is going to be really, really easy. You guys have seen this a million times before, but in case you haven't, pull out the clips on the DIMMs. We want the 2nd and 4th DIMM slots. Slide the RAM into place. Nice. And repeat that for as many DIMMs as you've got. There's the other one, there's 2, and we've got 2 slots left. So we can install 64 gigs later on if 32 gigs of memory is just not quite enough for what you're looking to remember, so to speak, on your system. Now then, once we've done that, you need to go ahead and install the SSD. But to do this, things are getting a little bit complicated. This top M.2 heatsink or heat shield needs removing. And to do that, you can't go ahead and use something like this, a standard Phillips head screwdriver. It's just too big. Instead, you'll need a small, teeny tiny screwdriver, a little bit like this one. Remove your heatsink at the top with a screw on either side and pick up your NVMe SSD choice. Now for this video, I've gone for the Samsung SSD 980 Pro. This right here is a super fast Gen 4 NVMe drive that delivers read speeds at least in the region of 7 gigabytes per second. This particular drive comes with a heatsink, meaning we won't need to use the heat shield that MSI include, although the non-heatsink drives are also available if you prefer to hide your Gen 4 NVMe away and not see it when the build is all powered up. So you Secure it into place with the tallest little doodad that MSI include, no need for a screw, and then you can keep your cover nice and safe in your motherboard's box for the time being. And once you've completed this step, our beautiful motherboard assembly, look at that, is complete, and we can move on to the next stage of the build, the CPU cooler and the case. Specifically for the cooler, I've picked up Corsair's H150i Elite Capellix, which ties in perfectly with the white theme I've gone for in today's build. Now, these coolers, most of them will come with 12GM mounting hardware included as standard, but if they don't, manufacturers will often provide upgrade kits like this one. Corsair shot this one over to allow us to install our lovely 150i Elite Capellix onto, of course, our MSI Force Wi-Fi. Inside of here, you'll find a bag labelled Intel hardware, and in here contains all of the mounting bits and bobs we're going to need. Primarily, we need this backplate. You can see here it's actually got some 3M sticky tape, which if we peel off, will make our backplate nice and sticky. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, if we flip the motherboard over, you'll be able to see here we've got the 4 holes for our Intel mounting. And basically, if we don't put this on in a sticky capacity, it'll fall off and get dead difficult to deal with. Enable the stickiness, slot the backplate through the holes on the back of the motherboard, push down firmly on each side, and then you're basically good to go. The backplate's through the motherboard, and you should now see 4 silver threads essentially poke through the holes on the motherboard itself. You'll then find a couple of extra bags, including one for Intel LGA 2011. That's not the one we need. 1200, not the one we want either. And then finally, LGA 1700, the brand new Intel socket type. The screw threads appear to be slightly larger, so that's just something to bear in mind. Take these out of your bag and screw them into the 4 threads we just looked at. That will then firmly secure the backplate in to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and we'll complete the rest of the mounting later after we've looked at the case choice for this system. Now, it would be true to say that there's lots and lots of case options on the market if you're looking to build a really nice white-themed gaming PC. But for this build, given some of the other Corsair component choices, the iCUE 4000X was just one of the only cases that actually made any sense. With a standard ATX form factor, tempered glass side panel, RGB fans included as standard, the iCUE 4000X is an awesome choice. It's a little bit on the pricey side, but let's be honest, today's system is hardly one of our more budget builds. You can go and check those out on the channel though if you're more interested. I say this time and time again in our builds, but lay the case down flat on the table for the next portion. It makes your life so much easier and allows us to show off our fancy overhead camera angle. What we need to do before installing the motherboard into the lovely Corsair iCUE is remove a couple of the standoffs. So you can see here we've got 3 standoffs at the top. They're all in exactly the right place. 3 along the middle. They're also pretty much perfectly located. And then 3 along the bottom, one of which is already there, but we've got 2 stray ones in the middle. So we're going to move those down to the bottom with a handy standoff tool, and then once we've done that, install the motherboard. The I/O shield will poke through the rear with all your lovely ports and all that jazz, and then you can screw the board down through each of the 9 screws. As I say, 3 up top, 3 down the middle, 3 along the bottom, nice and simple. And then we can finally install the cooler. Now, to do this in our case today, what we're going to need to do is actually go ahead and remove the front panel right here. Behind this, I've popped in 3 Corsair QL. That's these bad boys. RGB fans, they look absolutely stunning. They do a great job as well of keeping the system cool. What we need to do is take these ones out, then put the radiator in behind them, pop the screws all the way through, and once we've done that, the airflow and the cooling side of the video should be pretty much complete. The only thing I'm slightly worried about, actually now I think about it, is GPU clearance. Right, pause. This could be a bit of a problem. Right, so I've got myself the MSI SUPRIM 3070Ti. I'm just ruining the rest of the video, but I'm a bit concerned that it might be too big with the radiator. Oh, that's going to be tight. Oh, we've got a tape measure. So, by the looks of things, we've got how much clearance? 29 millimeters. So we need, I feel sick. I actually feel sick. We need our Corsair radiator to be less than that, which it might be. It is. This video might have been saved. Let's, I guess there's only one way to find out, and that way is actually to install the radiator, and we'll come back to the GPU afterwards. Hope for the best, and if not, I do have a backup plan. Or at least I'm going to think of one before I next speak to the camera. Oh dear. Deary me. I make these mistakes and bad decisions so you guys don't have to. Looking good so far, but the true answers will be revealed in just a moment. For now though, we can add on our Intel mounting brackets to our Corsair cooler. Then we're going to drop a dab of thermal paste onto the CPU itself. That's if I can get into this bottle of thermal paste. I'm going to need the... One second. I have retrieved the perfect tool for the job, a pair of pliers, there we go, and we just want to drop a dab of thermal paste onto the CPU. That is plenty, kind of a large grain of rice equivalent with these new Intel processors. Then we can add the cooler itself on, and we can secure it into place with these thumb screws that come included with our new Intel socket mounting hardware kit from Corsair. One on each corner, tighten in a cross pattern, and finish off with a screwdriver to make sure the cooler is nice and tight and not going to go anywhere. And now it's time for the moment of truth. It's time to install the one and only GPU. In order to install the card, we need to remove a couple of the PCIe covers, specifically slots 2 and 3. So I'm going to take out the one that's currently on the third, pop that in the top to fill the void, and then slide the GPU in. Here we go. That's kind of looking promising so far. It is very tight. That just about went in. Oh my goodness, I was not expecting that. That is literally, I want to say, millimeters. It's time for DIY Handyman James to see once again. Oh my goodness. 4 millimeters. 4 millimeters of clearance. So you definitely couldn't go push-pull on your radiator. It's a good job I didn't go that adventurous with the fans. But it does look great. And the white-silver theme is looking awesome so far. Let's screw the GPU in, secure that into place. And then I think we've only got one component left. And that's our power supply to give all of our components nice, juicy power. This right here is Corsair CX750F. And to say that it fits with the theme of the build today would be an understatement. We still might opt to put in some white sleeve cable extensions, but even these stock will look pretty good. With white cables, they'll definitely match the theme. The motherboard power cable is just not particularly aesthetically pleasing, shall we say, with the sleeved finish, when something braided would look a bit better. For us though, that doesn't matter too much. We're just going to pop in the motherboard power cable, one for our PCIe graphics card, one for the CPU, and then a SATA to power up all of our RGB fans, lighting, and all that good stuff. And then you need to plug those connectors up to the other end, starting with the motherboard cable, like so, then our two 6+2 pin or 8 pin connections for the GPU, and then finally our 4+4 or 8 pin connections for the CPU. This video isn't going to be a full cables and wiring guide, sorry, but if you'd like to find one of those, you can on the channel. For now though, I think it's time to actually boot our system up and see how it looks in an epic glam montage in true GeekaWhat style before we look at the performance numbers shortly afterwards. I'll see you in a second, but first, roll that montage. Now that we've seen how good the PC looks, and I'm not being funny, I think it looks absolutely fantastic, it's time to make sure the performance numbers stack up the same. On your screen now is a snapshot, a summary of all the different results, all the frame rates, all the settings that we achieved in some of the most popular titles. Don't worry, we will be taking a closer look at individual games in just a moment, but I like to use this view because it gives us a really good idea of the performance we're able to achieve. The 3070 Ti slots in perfectly between the 3080 and cheaper 3070, and that shows evidently in GTA 5, where at 4K high settings, we achieved 144 frames per second on average, with 122 and 111 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. We'll pop some comparison spreadsheets on your screen throughout the benchmarks, so you can see how this card stacks up against some of its cheaper and more expensive and equally out of stock rivals. It was a very similar story in Battlefield 2042, at least as far as the high performance levels are concerned. We first tested at 1440p high settings, achieving 91 FPS. That was with no DLSS enabled. Turning on DLSS and setting it to performance mode shot our frame rate up by around about 15% to 105 frames per second on average. As you can see from the on-screen comparison, DLSS makes a huge difference here, and smokes many AMD games simply out of the water. It was once again the same story in COD Vanguard, but more extreme this time. 4K, high settings gave us 70 FPS on average with no DLSS enabled, while tuning DLSS on gave us a staggering 40 FPS more frame rate. That's more than 40% of an increase as far as our frame rate goes, with 110 on average. Moving on to the brand new Forza Horizon 5, this is the hardest to run racing game I've ever played, and at 4K ultra settings we achieved 83 frames per second on average. More than 60 frames, which is always our target, but for a racing game this frame rate is more than adequate. What about Halo Infinite though? Well, at 1440p, I'm glad to report we achieved 125 FPS in this title, our next gaming test. Strong 90 and 99th percentile results rounded off a very impressive suite for Halo Infinite, and I was really pleased with the performance. Moving on to Apex Legends, a more esports oriented title. Here at 1440p high settings, we got 140 FPS. Many people ask me, James, why don't you test this at low settings or 1080p? Well, frankly, 140 at 1440p high shows just how much more mileage there is if frame rate is the priority. To round things out in our last gaming test then, we also tested out Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings. Here we achieved just shy of 240 FPS with 210 and 189 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. And with that, that just about wraps it up for this one. If you enjoyed it, make sure to get subscribed, drop a like rating, comment your thoughts, questions or queries. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.